So good afternoon, everybody. We are together this afternoon as a group of citizens who care about a more just and equitable society. And we've invited Songezo Zibi to introduce to us what he is up to in both the Rivonia circle and then his personal kind of ambitions of leading change in the country. So Songezo, I'm not going to try to introduce you. That would be a mistake. I'm going to ask you to share with us your story. We are here today because we're curious and interested in you, your story, and what you're up to. And I'm going to hand over immediately to you. And also just want to say to everybody, if you haven't got the book yet, have not read the book, please do so. But that's the topic of the second part of the conversation. The first part of the conversation is about Rivonia Circle. Welcome, Songezo.
Hi, Louise, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. It is a little overwhelming to be the one who has to do a lot of talking. But I've got my colleague, Londi Wendambo, but I'm sure she'll come in later when we talk about our work that we do at Rivonia Circle. So my name is Songezo Zibi. I'm from Ganduli, which is just off the N2 between Mthatha and Madiba's house. That's where the turnoff is. If you're going from Mthatha to East London, you take a turnoff to Hole in the Wall and Coffee Bay for those who've been in that part of the world. And that's where I grew up. And I was born in 1975. I'm 46. I'm married with 3 kids, 2 boys, and the little girl, she's 5 years old. The boys are 15 and 13. One of them is knocking on the door to bring me coffee. So, because I'd asked for coffee a long time ago. So I grew up in Mkanduli, but I left in 1989 really to go to boarding school. I was 14 years old. I first went to Mthatha, St. John's College, which is where the president was speaking on Youth Day, that school. The gentleman who's a principal there was 2 years ahead of me. And he's done a fantastic job. He's turned that school around together with the staff there. And it's producing regularly pass marks of over 90% every year. And it was the kind of school when I was there that we read about in the papers because it is so bad. So that was that school. So he's done a fantastic job. He's one of the people I'm really privileged to know. But that's where I did my 1 year of high school, standard 8. I think everyone around here, maybe except 1 or 2 people, know what standard 8 is. I did my standard 8 there, and then I was lucky enough to go to a private high school, which was NGO and philanthropy funded in Bishop, called All Saints Senior College. To this day, I still don't know how I ended up there because I wasn't academically excelling at all, but I must have said something in the entrance test that made them take me. And it had a really profound impact on my life because we were treated like adults immediately. There was no corporal punishment. We didn't wear uniform. And we were really encouraged to be ourselves and to interact with one another. And we were from all over the country. So we were not in a closed environment. And that helped me to start developing a sense of what being a South African is all about and meeting all of these people and so on. I subsequently studied at both Walter Sisulu University, bad decision, my own doing, because I thought I could do BCom and I hated statistics, applied stats. I really, really, truly hated it. And I dropped out after 2 years. And my mother was extremely upset with me. So I said I wanted to be a journalist, but this is 1995, I think it was, and journalists were getting killed a couple of years before because of the violence that we had. So she said, absolutely not. And that's how I ended up in corporate communications. When I left Nelson Mandela, what is now Nelson Mandela University, I went to work at Volkswagen. I spent 8 years there. It was during the time the country started with its car export program. Volkswagen was the first When I joined, they told me that they were not sure if I was going to get a permanent job after my internship or not, because the factory could have closed. And so I got to see how you can move from a place of pessimism, but with good intervention and good stakeholder involvement between the unions and the provincial government and national government, I was able to have a job, and Volkswagen is still there and employing lots of people with lots of suppliers and so on. So that was my first experience of the real economy and what can be done with it. To give you a sense, in Utenade, if one company is on strike, like Goodyear or Volkswagen or Johnson's Controls, the whole town shuts down because it's a chain, it's an assembly chain. So nobody can move. And if there was a strike for 1 week, then all the businesses suffer. So I learned a lot there. I then moved up here to Gauteng, joined a company called Extractor PLC. I spent 7 years. And then at the end of that 7 years, I thought I was taking a sabbatical for a year to write my first book. Didn't happen because I told Peter Bruce that what I was doing. He said, no, nonsense, man, come and write it there at the Financial Mail. And I was there for 3 years, including being editor of Business Day for the last 2 years. And that also had a very profound impact on me, probably the beginnings of me wanting to do more, because I really got sucked in. And when I was editor of Business Day, people were telling me about all of this stuff that was happening in government, in politics, the whistleblowers and so on. And I was a combination of sad and angry and enraged and all the emotions. And I think a lot of us were going through that. It's also the time that I had to decide whether I was going to pay my e-tolls or not, because Wayne was busy agitating that we shouldn't pay our e-tolls. And in the end, I decided, oh, well, screw them. I stopped paying too. And then I joined ABSA when I left Business Day after 2 years. And I was there for 5.5 years. I left at the end of last year because my colleagues at Rivonia Circle and I were totally crazy enough to want to start a non-profit in the middle of a pandemic, which by all measures of rational career decision-making is a bad decision. But I think we have equally poor judgment because we all plowed into it, and we're having fun so far, and we're learning a lot, and I look forward to chatting to all of you. So that's my story, but I said to Louise, I'm really quite open about any aspect of my life. I don't have any money hidden in a couch or anything like that, so I'm quite happy.
We hope not. We hope not, Sanke.
I'm good.
We're going to do this as a kind of interactive process. So if anybody at any point want to ask Songeza something about what he said, or because we're going to go into Rivonia Circle in a minute, but just want to make sure that we create a space. If anybody wanted to say something, you can either just unmute yourself, and then I'll know that you want to say something, or you can put your electronic hand up. I'll probably won't see your physical hand. It doesn't look as if anybody wants to say anything yet, Zongeza. This is they're going to engage in a minute, but let's keep going. So you started a not-for-profit during the pandemic called the Rivonia Circle, but it didn't start. That has strong foundations in kind of a think tank and a group of people, because I remember a conversation that I had with Prince many years ago about, was it called Rivonia Circle then, or was it the Midland, what was it called then?
The Midrand Group. Yeah. The Midrand Group really was actually a beer drinking club. And people didn't believe it, but it's true. So what we would do is we would gather typically on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday, usually Saturday afternoon, actually. We would gather and gather for lunch and start talking about the state of the country and the world and just continue arguing. Sometimes until 7 or 8 p.m. That day, people would go and run errands and come back. And then after all of that conversation, thoughts crystallize in your mind about what you want to write about. So we started writing and signing ourselves off as the Midrand Group. Just to be sure, we only met once in Midrand. We didn't meet in Midrand again. We always met in Centurion because none of us stayed in Midrand. But after that, I think so many people noticed that we would get requests from people wanting to meet the directors of the migrant group, which didn't exist. The point, though, is that we were brought together by one thing, and that was a very deep love for South Africa and care for what should happen to it. But it never went beyond, the conversation and the writing. But it really was the beginnings of doing something bigger.
Okay, and then how did the Rivonia Circle come about?
So the Rivonia Circle came about. So the original founders, and one of our directors, Tessa, is going to join us in a while. And the Rivonia Circle was initially founded by myself, Lorato Tsenkeng, who's a director, Lukona, who's a director. You've met Lukona, Louise, and Luzu Kokoti. Luzu Kokoti sadly passed on in March. He had cancer, and it attacked him quickly and aggressively, and within a month he was no longer with us. So he's no longer with us, but we had known each other for a very long time. Luzuko, I had known him the longest, and we'd always discuss the future of South Africa. In fact, I can't remember a single time we were together that we didn't, and we were together many times. And we got to the point where we decided that analyzing South Africa's problems is just not going to help. There are too many things that are not going in that direction, notwithstanding the fact that there are thousands of ordinary South Africans who are literally propping up the country while the politicians are distracted and doing destructive things. And had it not been for those people, I think we would have long collapsed already. And so we decided that we also need to play our part. We need to start an organization, and that organization needs to try and drive change, and political change in particular, because we are a democracy. One of the things that has been neglected over the last 27 years is democratization, building a democratic culture. And that culture means people need to accept that democracy is a system of self-government. So you never switch off. It's not just about the voting. It's every day doing something, however small, in some institution that you choose to care about in order to make it better and so on. And so that project of democratization has not really been undertaken with the intensity that we needed to do it. Some would say it's a little bit late now, but it's never too late to start. And I'm sure all of you know that. And so democratization, big aspect of what we needed to do. We did that for another reason, and that is there is a big belief in big personalities in South Africa. I think Madiba and them spoiled us, that you get these magicians who are able to just make things happen. And in real life, as you know, things don't happen like that. We need to mobilize one another, select the best among us in order to create the kind of society and political system that we need. And so the political aspect of it is quite clear in that sense, that we want people to be politically active, to be very informed, and to think and imagine the country being different, what we call South Africa version 2.0, because it's important that we imagine what we can fix at community level all the way to national level. So that was the one thing. The second thing is public policy ideas for moving South Africa forward. Reforms politically, economically, taking account of climate change, the general well-being of society, the so-called social cohesion for which some politicians simply want to erect a flag. And also thinking about how to fix our government itself, our state itself. So that research element is quite big, and we're going to talk about it later on. And then the last is I would characterize as identifying leaders and change agents throughout all corners of South Africa, and working with them to build a sense of national purpose, to be bold, to believe that we can shape the country in our worldview, and that worldview is informed by the values entrenched in our constitution, that our goal is not to trash it, but to amplify it and expand its meaning in order to achieve justice in South Africa. We don't want those people to only be politicians. We want those people to be in all sectors of South African life, because wouldn't it be beautiful if people who shared the same values and dreams about South Africa were in business, they were in politics, they were in the church, they were in sports and so on, and at what I call a moral level, we all believe in the same thing. We all founded on the same set of values, and we try and create a better country out of that. So we have a strong desire to do that. And part of that is recognizing the many leaders, young and old, but in particular the young, who are already in communities and doing this work. And so in a sense, that is the work of Rivonia Circle.
So, Songezo, there's so many connections. I just want to create a few of those connections. So South Africa 2.0, I don't know whether you've been part of the conversations that Ashraf Garda has been leading around Champion South Africa.
Yes, I'm also on his WhatsApp group.
You're also on that WhatsApp group. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But and I've always been so excited about all of the conversations that came out of there. And what personally I'm excited about is that the Rivonia Circle could really be a mobilizer for us to kind of come behind, so that we don't all have to feel that we have to create our own thing. We can join you. Now, many years ago, many people on this call will remember that we were very inspired by this video. I did ask Lucano whether you know about it. It's called Waiting for Superman. And it was made in America. And it was made about the American education system. And the message, the core message from this video, DVD, was that Superman, it was a kind of message to the Americans to say, Superman is a fictional character. He's not coming. He's not coming. So now what? What does that mean for us if he's not going to come? And I think your point around waiting for the big leader, those days are over. We've seen that that's not getting us anywhere. And it is time for every one of us. And I know that many people on this call do feel particularly called to lead. Now, so that's the first thing. South Africa 2.0, we'd love to know a little bit more about that work. Public policy ideas, a lot of that I read in your book, but if you want to tell us more about it, and we definitely would love to hear from Lucano and Tessa if they are on the call. And then this idea of a community of leaders. All of the people on this call are people who identify as leaders who care about a more just and equitable South Africa, a South Africa 2.0 that we can all believe in and rally behind. So you're in the right group of people who I'm absolutely convinced that once they know a little bit more about Rivonia Circle will want to support you and what you do. I want to give you one example. Last week we had Wayne and his team from Outer, and there was a call to action for people who care about water. And immediately a whole group of people put their hands up and said, we want to be part of leading that initiative. So I'm quite sure that if you put some calls to us today, there will be some people who say, well, we get excited about that particular initiative and we want to rally behind it, and we want to know, how do we do that? I'm seeing John Lucas like nodding his head. He's kind of can't contain himself. He wants to be part of your team. And he's young enough, Songezo. I did feel a bit dismissed in reading your book because I am old. So I did feel I was heart sore, but John Luke's young. And there are many other young leaders. So
don't worry, I'll be 50 soon. So I'm also making myself irrelevant soon.
You said there's people who are in their late 50s. I thought, oh my goodness, there he's got my number. But I promise you, if you knew the people on this call, even those of us in our, beyond, we still have a contribution to make. Steve Hall, Pete Laban, Guy Harris, Dave Wilson. I mean, we might be old, but we still have a lot to offer. So tell us about those three pieces, Zongezo, and if we're able to hear from your team members, that would be fabulous.
Yes, and in fact, I'm going to bring Londi in because the first one, I spoke about democracy builder. So let me just preface it by saying that the thing about about the last 30 years is that, the public have become voting fodder, and people can see that, so they're not voting anymore because in between elections, it's meaningless. Now, there are people are beginning to talk about a benevolent dictatorship. I'm sure you come across that, where people say they want a Paul Kagame in South Africa and so on. This is an exceptionally bad idea. We don't need less democracy. We need more democracy instead. And we must not be shy of the obligation to make sure that as many South Africans as possible participate from an informed basis and are part of democratic decision making, rather than being made promises by people that they never see again. And then those people rock up at election time and there's some sort of quasi performance review, which is not a real one. And then those people are gone again. It's happened for nearly 6 election cycles, and it must not happen again. So that work is our contribution to that project is through something we call Democracy Builder. Tessa, who's an absolute workhorse, she basically jumped in, and I think she was the first person to get paid at RC because just couldn't not pay her. And then she went to fetch Londi, who is on the call. And the two of them have crisscrossed the country, talking and working with real people in communities, in places that we sometimes see on TV because something bad happened there. But they go to each community, spend days there, and let the people speak, actually, and let the people come up with their version of South Africa 2.0. And I'm just going to ask Londi to just tell everybody about Democracy Builder and her experiences on the road.
And Londi, we also want to know a little bit about this, the emerging picture around South Africa 2.0 and how that's being collated and shared and created. So lovely to hear from you.
Sure. Thank you so much. I hope that everybody can hear me clearly, and that we won't have any stage 6 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is during this conversation. Thank you so much for the platform. I mean, I think this is an incredibly important conversation. So when we so I am Londiwe. I am with the team at Rivonia Circle, and I think Songezo used the right terminology when he says Tessa fetched me from wherever I was. And it's been so good to do this kind of work that I'm incredibly passionate about, which is thinking about and engaging and talking about our democracy and how we develop the kind of society and the kind of country that we want and that we deserve, really. So the Democracy Builder is one of the programs that we do. The Democracy Builder is really a project that, or rather a program that seeks to co-create with communities. So we start off with a day of engagement with the communities around what are their thoughts on words like democracy, on words like governance, on words like politics. And I mean, obviously, because of the crisis that we're in generally as a country, oftentimes you get a lot of sort of negative connotations associated with the words politics, with the word governance. People are quite frankly fed up. But what is interesting is that they still are interested in then engaging about what the alternative is, about what we can do as citizens to make it better. And I think that that's really important. And the Democracy Builder then also has a project aspect where we co-create solutions with the communities. And so we ask people to engage with us about the problems that they are facing in their own context, in their own communities, and how we can work towards solving that. And so the result of that has been, I think, about 18 projects that have come out of 8 Democracy Builders, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so 8 Democracy Builders, there's been 18 projects, a few have been completed, and some are obviously ongoing. I think what's interesting about the projects is that people really want to work and really want to do, they want to solve the problems within their communities. So some of the examples of the projects that we've done in Durban, which I think KZN really has pulled through when it comes to the Democracy Builder projects. In Durban, we've had, I think, 3 projects. One responding directly to youth skills development and access to information around university bursaries and those kinds of things. And that project took place last week in Mlas. What's interesting there is that the way that the youth set up the project, because it was the youth group that set up the project and ran the project for themselves, the way that they set it up was in a way where it's not about getting out of Umlazi, right? But it's about how do we give people access to information where they are, and also give people access to government and to other different kinds of institutions where they are. And so that's, it's been really interesting to see people create directed solutions for themselves and for their communities. And I think part of the work around Democracy Builder, as Usongezo mentioned earlier on, is this idea of South Africa 2.0 or South Africa 2.0. And I think I found it really, really interesting to engage with people about what they think that this country can look like or should look like. What is a little bit disheartening is that when you ask people to think about their ideal, sometimes the thing that they then put on the board or that they then say are things that, to me, should be basic. Equal access to healthcare, equal access to education, those kinds of conversations, and that obviously there shouldn't be disparities between the kinds of public service that we engage with based on who we are and where we are. And so it's been I don't know, it's been a bit disheartening to see that the bar is so low. It is just so low. And that really as like government, the way that we engage with government needs to be to push and push so that we get to a situation where we have a government that cares about people's well-being, that prioritizes people's well-being, because democracy is about well-being, right? It's about siphila kanjani singabantu, and I think that that's particularly important. So, and I mean, some people have the most fantastic, the most, you know, sort of the most ideal kind of South Africa 2.0. And I think the most interesting conversation has been around the conversation of work and employment, where some people have said, well, I want to live in a world where we don't have to work at all. We work if we want to, where our well-being and our access to whether it's public service or to community and to community isn't directly linked to class. So when people say they don't want to work, that's not about being lazy. That's a conversation about class and access to things like healthcare, right? And that there shouldn't be that link that if you are poor, you don't have access to healthcare. And I mean, that's just not the world that we want to live in. So yeah, those are some of the conversations that have come up in the different communities. I'm really, really excited about that work because I think that work is the building block for the thing that we want to do nationally. And I think that work will show us or tell us whether or not there are things that we can scale from communities. So things that come up in communities that we can scale, that we can learn from in order to fix the problems nationally, because really we are in a crisis. And I think some of the ideas that come from the communities, it might not necessarily be about, oh, let's scale them and apply them nationally, but it's about how do we then recreate them in different societies that have the same issues. Yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
So Londiwe, before we hand over to Songezo, I just want to say to you that one of the things that I offered to Songezo, that many people on this call have been involved for the last, for a few decades in mobilizing citizenship in communities. And we would love to join forces with you, because I think there's something about how do we take what you and Tessa have been doing and scale it rapidly to get many communities around the country to start to dream and feel a sense of ownership for that dream, rather than waiting for Superman or waiting for Rivonia Circle or waiting for Songezo or waiting for some politician, because it is our future in our hands. And the more we can feel a sense of ownership for that future that we are committed to, the more we can start to make things happen. I mean, if you had to know the quality of the people in the school and to what extent they are connected into communities and could potentially do stuff. So that's one thing that I'd love for us to kind of explore as we go forward, is how do we take what you've done, these eight democracy builder sessions and the 18 projects, and just spread it like pixie dust all over the country and get stuff happening in communities. I mean, I'm just seeing Steve Hall and Pete Laban have a very strong relationship with some communities in KZN, and we shouldn't let them off the hook any longer. We should call them to action, say, we need you to work with Rivonia Circle in those communities, and every one of us are involved in some communities. So that's I'd love to figure out how to do this. Londiwe, your name's not on our WhatsApp group yet. We need to get you on the WhatsApp group. But thank you. Let's hear from Songezo then about the next part, which is the public policy ideas, Songezo. Thank you very much, Londiwe.
So the next part, Louise, has got to do with how we solve the national problems. And we've decided to do our work maybe in an unusual way, which is not start by hiring the research experts, but start by doing this kind of work that Londiwe is talking about, because it's important that we do it in a way that is as responsive and as nuanced as possible, so that it is responsive to the needs of real people or to the solutions that people really want. So, and that when those ideas are on the table, people can see or hear their own voice in the output itself, because they were in a democracy builder, and now there is a paper on the table. It's written in simple language, it's accessible, and they can see things that they have said before, because somebody went and actually did real scholarly work on that in order to develop real solutions. That doesn't mean we'll be entirely dependent on the feedback from a democracy builder, but it's important that we take that part of our research very seriously, because people have a view about democratization and constitutionalism, which is political reform in common language. They have views on the economy, they have views on leadership, on politics, and so on. So when these things are on the table, people begin to engage with this information. One of the commitments we made earlier on, Louise, was to say our research output is going to be freely available. And we are going to resist the temptation to only go to seminars with only 30 people or 50 people. We are going to put our work, our output in graphics, in video, in isiZulu, in isiXhosa, in isiTswana, and so on, so that for the first time, real people who have been neglected in terms of political consultation and only get token consultation when political parties want to change legislation, Parliament wants to change legislation, and do this lip service. There will be some policy proposals on the table that they look at this and they say, I said that. I said that, right? Because then they are likely to take ownership of it and use it to politically engage. Now, I said in the beginning, democratization is important. We must take it seriously, more democracy, not less. And so this work is a combination of what comes out of Democracy Builder and the scholarly work. Just in closing, there are some critical areas. One, our political system is broken. We must fix it. If we're going to make proposals on how to fix the political system, you better have the feedback of a couple of thousand people that you've actually eyeballed and spoken to, and they've told you what they want, right? So that's the first thing. We can get the constitutional law experts and so on. Those must work around the wishes of the people that we've spoken to so that we can produce something that works and we use it for further conversation. That's one. Secondly, our economy needs to modernize, it needs to absorb more unemployed people, etc., etc. We can't do that if we don't take account of the modernization of the global economy. We don't take account of climate change. We don't take account of the structural issues we have in our economy. But we also need to understand what people are expecting in the way of work. The point that Londiwe made about work and not needing to work, this is what people mean. My healthcare should not depend on me having a job and medical aid. South Africa should work as well for me without medical aid as it does for the person with medical aid. Or put differently, I should be able to choose not to have expensive medical aid because the public health facilities work. What people are working for right now is the opportunity to have the most basic things. It's crazy. So we must strive to be a society where you can be a full citizen with dignity and not have to exchange it for a job. So our public policy work, politics, economy, climate change, wellness and well-being, guys, this is important. People are suffering from layers and layers of trauma, historical and current. Communities are broken. The solutions we come up with in terms of social infrastructure that creates an environment where everybody can say, I have a full life. That's real work that needs to be done by experts, but also understanding what people are looking for. So that's going to be our public policy work. And hopefully that work, again, changes the nature of the political and social conversation that we have.
Thank you, Zongeza. We're going to look at the last part of Rivonia Circle, and then we're going to shift gears because we're going to look at we're going to ask Zongeza about his manifesto. But before we do that, I just want to invite you, if anybody has a question, there's some questions in the chat from Guy. Carmen, do you want a question about what we've talked about so far? And then we're going to hear about that last part around leadership. But Carmen, you're on.
Thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak. I just want to understand, you spoke about modernization of the economy, right? And in terms of public policy, one of the things that I've picked up, not just in South Africa, but particularly in the continent as well, is the disparities in education. Now, in the absence of addressing education and evening like leveling the education to be equal for all and affording people to learn the same quality of education. Even if we go to modernization, how do you think we are going to be able to get there? And then in terms of modernization, having been in Finland and Estonia, which are very savvy with tech and so forth, with the amount of people that are unemployed and the amount of challenges we have just with basics, as you've mentioned, how would we then fast track skilling? Because one of the biggest challenges I've heard from other people on the continent and internationally, South Africans are great at policy making, we're great at research, we just really struggle with implementing things. So how do we move from the theory, the research, to actual implementation? Because that is an area that needs to be fast-tracked. Thank you very much.
So Zongeza, if you want to respond to that now, or you can respond to that when we get to the manifesto.
Let me respond to this quickly so that I can do justice to the question, and I won't be long. So we disagree that South Africa has great policies, by the way. The entire policy thinking framework is wrong-headed. So let me give you an example. And I will use the modernization of the economy as a starting point, because you've brought the subject on. You can't produce great economic outcomes if your social infrastructure is broken. You can't produce great schooling outcomes if your social infrastructure is broken. So you can equip the school as much as you want, but if there are drug problems, load shedding, potholes, and all of this kind of thing, you're just not going to get the outcome, in particular for poor communities, most of which are Black, because the obstacles that somebody has got to jump over in order to get to an outcome that gives them an opportunity at getting decent employment are enormous, and we take them for granted. A recent example, the tragedy in East London. And we can talk about kids and getting drunk and parents who are neglectful and that sort of thing. But I'm sure there is a situation in there where there is a single parent who's a security guard who was at work. So they've got to choose between parenting and working to put food on the table. And millions of South Africans make that choice every day. That's the choice my mother made. If I didn't have grandparents, then I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. So what point am I making? The point I'm making is our orientation around these solutions is more integrated than how we think. And how we think in current policy understanding. And therefore, when we talk about modernizing the economy, we're talking about a whole chain of things. The first, the education is critical. The infrastructure around your education system is critical. And what does that mean? That means your network infrastructure has got to work, your water, your technology, and so on, so that you can create real economic opportunities in Mganduli, where I come from, where you can use modern farming, crop and stock farming methods in some of the most fertile land in the world. That enables you to change the equation of what it means to find work, because you don't have these internal migration patterns which create bottlenecks and strain that are concentrated only around the metro areas. You think differently about economic development in a devolved way that involves investment in multiple types of infrastructure so that you can modernize at different points. Right now, the policy thinking in South Africa is an old 19th and 20th century industrial society where everybody goes to a large factory and works a 9-to-5 job. That's the thinking. And you will know as much as I do that we're moving more towards a gig economy. Having grown up in a village, people have been in a gig economy for decades and centuries. You work early in the morning, you take a break, you do something else during the day, you come back in the afternoon, you work again, and so on. How do you then build an economy around how people live? We're not doing that at the moment. And therefore, we're breaking society in order to create work.
Thank you, Zongezo. I'm sure that Carmen is inspired by your response. Tell us about Carmen. Do you want to say anything about that, or shall we continue and hear from Zongezo about that third piece of work, which is around identifying leaders and change agents and mobilizing them and creating more leadership capacity in our society?
No, I just wanted to get clarity on that, because I think like he thinks about the holistic approach, because that has been lacking. So I think in that level, we are on par. Having been in the policy system and having been a policymaker and still there, there's a lot that we need to change in the way we think and how we need to recreate. So thank you for that response. There is a lot of areas that we need to look at, and there's some. I mean, I've been participating in this for a short while, and there's a lot of convergence here. And some of us are in the public policy space, and me, I'm a former ambassador. And I believe that change is really warranted in South Africa and the continent. I also think that democracy, the way democracy is dealt with, is not, it cannot be a one shoe fits all. It has to be within the conditions of society. And as we embark on this path, it's important to look at the type of democracy that you need, because I saw the failure in South Sudan, because I worked there. I've seen, you know, our challenges here. You see what's happening in Zimbabwe and in Mozambique. And we need to develop our own style democracy and not import democracy from outside. And I think that has been part of our biggest challenges. But thank you for that.
Carmen, I do want to encourage you to, if you haven't read Zongezo's book yet, to please get a copy and read it. Start it this weekend. It will inspire you. Zongezo, let's get back to your third part of work, or the third piece of work that Rivonia Circle is involved with.
Yes, so you will have seen that even in the book, I do like wag a finger at professionals like myself, and so having pricked people to contribute. So we are inundated with people who want to help in different ways, and not help Rivonia Circle. They just say, I want to help the country. I want to be part of creating the change. And some of these people have got experience in various areas. Somebody got in touch with us and said, I do low-cost housing. I can train people on how to build low-cost houses themselves and create enterprises and so on, and I'll do it for free. That was one person. Others are economists. Wandile Sihlobo fields is very close to agriculture, is very close to his heart, and rural development and so on. So he's put up his hand and is mobilizing other young economists to help with the same and so on. So you've got that level of assistance, and anybody here who's got expertise, who wants to help, we're going to create as big a network as we can. We're building the digital platform for it so that people can find each other. They can see what others are trying to do and realize that if that project or that work needs just 3 people, one is an accountant, the other one is this, people put up their hand and say, hey, I'll give you 3-4 Saturdays a quarter, and I'll work with you guys to make sure this thing survives and it thrives and so on. So we're going to give people an opportunity to do that on the one hand. People are going to get an opportunity to take part in our research work, in the reference groups and so on. So that's the first part. The second part is going to be really exciting. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we're going to launch it formally, but we're going to find change agents in communities across South Africa. And we're going to bring this network of people and keep mobilizing, going to bring it to bear on those projects. So where somebody was trying to do something really wonderful that you've assessed that it actually can really work, it needs a bit of help, it needs resources, skills, experience, money. We're going to come in and help that person, make it bigger, improve it, and then understand the blueprint of how it really works, make that available to other people who want to do the same thing elsewhere, and then bring that network, keep making it bigger in order to make a difference in people's lives. The reason we do that is that there are not enough government resources to solve everybody's problem at the same time. But South Africans are incredibly talented and resourceful. So we're talking to South Africans here, we're talking to South Africans overseas, in the UK, in Canada, and so on. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in London. I thought I was meeting a Peter Mail, a businessman there. And so Peter Mail walks in, and I think, you do look like you're from Limpopo now. He says, I am. He says, I am. Hugely successful guy. And he says, listen, on any weekend, I can gather about 300 successful South Africans here in the UK. So you tell me when you guys are ready. We'll mobilize them. We'll get them to help in any way that they can. So you see, there are people who want to work. We're simply going to try and create the opportunity for them to do something.
So Zongezo, before you go too far down the line with regard to your IT platform, I want to tell you that on this call, we have some people do amazing work with building platforms for citizen mobilization. Also, I'll let them speak for themselves. Let me not do that on their behalf. I also want to let you know that Alta and Wayne and the team are working to create these community action networks. And so we want to see more cohesion and alignment and working together, because we have all been wasting too much of our resources doing our own thing. So partly what we are trying to do in this community is to make some connections. So Callum and Jean-Luc, this is your opportunity. There's a queue for you, and Wayne and Alta, we please need you to make sure that Zongezo and the team from Rivonia Circle know what you're doing. And then Linda Smith is here from the 50+ skills community. She has a whole community of people around the country who are on their way to that. They've lost, many of them have kind of left their former jobs. They're now in this decade or the few decades of sharing what they know with generosity and a spirit of abundance and generosity. So she wants to bring her network to bear. So there are lots of networks in this little group of people that we have here, Zongezo. So please, let's not, and our only request from you would be, don't reinvent the wheel. There are many people who have been doing this work and want to contribute their thinking and their experience to what you're doing.
Thank you. That's why we want a network, because if somebody can do that, then we don't need to buy it. They can help us. They can help us build on something that is already there.
So on that, let me just check whether anybody else has another question about the work of Rivonia Circle, because we're gonna move to talking to Zongezo about his own kind of thought leadership around mobilizing citizens to take responsibility for the future of the country, as he has set out in the manifesto. So I'm not seeing any other hands, Zongezo. So now it's over to you. The story was pitched. Those of us who've read the book know that one little sentence that says, I am willing to step up and lead myself, and if that means I have to be president, I will do that, is very different to how it was portrayed by Zongezo has put his hat in the ring for president. So tell us the story about how that all happened, and then specifically give us a kind of executive summary around Manifesto for those people who haven't had a chance to read it yet. Hopefully, by the end of this call, they will all run out and go and get a copy of the book.
No, awesome. Thank you. In fact, even though they have written the book, myself, one of the people I acknowledge at the back is Lukon, who's now joined us. So he might join in, come in here and there, because him and I have been in constant conversation for 11 years. We met in 2011, the first time. And he's one of those people I talk to about South Africa all the time. He's Orlando Pirates, I'm Kaizer Chiefs. I can't remember the last time we spoke about football. I mean, it's very rare that we do. We always talk about the country. And in many ways, the book is partly a reflection of the conversations we have. He's not a morning person, but I would call him at 6:30 while driving to work. And we talk while I'm stuck in traffic. So the book is about the following: that the idea that South Africa needs a reset. We've had 27 years of freedom. The infrastructure, institutional infrastructure that we have was built around not just freedom from apartheid, but managing exigencies that we had in 1994. You will recall that there was a big fear factor in 1994. Some people, you will recall, packed canned food and water and guns and bullets in case the black people came looking for them. And then it didn't happen. And 2 years later, they were celebrating, or a year later, they were celebrating a World Cup win. And it was like, forget it. But all of that stuff that we put in place, proportional representation system, party list system, and so on, has also given us some problems that have made it necessary for for a guy like Wayne to do what he spent the last many years doing, which is trying to reverse the vices of that system, right? So the proposition is, guys, let us take a step back, take a deep breath, say what's working and what is not working, and how do we change it so that it helps us to build the society we want to build. That's who we want to be. So that's the first proposition in the book. The second proposition is that we must be bold in terms of the South Africa that we want. We must not be shy. Incremental change is going to take too long. We must make bold changes where we need to make bold changes. And we must make bold moves. And the people that need to be bold are the younger people, because those younger people will have to deal with the future. They'll still be around 40 years later to deal with the consequences, hopefully, of their decisions now. But if they're not in a decision-making capacity, it's really difficult. But you don't get selected to be in a decision-making capacity. You have to step up and show that you are available through your actions, that you can become a leader, even if you are young. And so there is that proposition in the book. I also make some reflections about the things we've done terribly over the last 27 years, and that we need to examine the soul of the country and reflect upon what we have become. It says something about our society that Zweli Mkhize still thinks he can be president. It really does. Because what is it about us that makes him think that morally we are not offended and that we will elect? What is broken? What is broken in our society? And so how do we rebuild around a moral idea that says we want to be a values-based society where leadership doesn't only legislate, but also leads in the sense, to use an evangelical term, of ministry, where you try and build the soul of the society itself so that we can do the things that the kind of people you have in this conversation are trying to do. But how do we make it a thing without having a paternalistic society? And our constitution, the preamble to our constitution, gives us the foundations of how we can morally think about the society we build and how we work together in order to do that. So that's the foundation of my book. And I therefore tackle the economy, I tackle society, I tackle politics extensively, changes in political institutions, all the way to saying that the changes we need to make in government. And then, as Louisa said, that having said all of this, I fully intend to do every single thing that I say in this book, because I am asking other people to do the same. I couldn't possibly step back and say, oh, well, I'm just a writer. You guys, you do it. I've given it to you. That wouldn't work. And so I've decided to follow through and be part of efforts to do exactly the things that I say need to be done.
Thank you, Zongeza. Let's open the floor in here. So John Luke has a question in the chat. He says, how do we measure our progress? What are the metrics for the meters we make? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Zongeza. And then I also want to just invite anybody else who want to be in a conversation with Zongeza. We didn't come to just listen to Zongeza speak at us. We've had enough of that. We actually want to be in conversations. So please, if you want to share your thoughts, Safiwe. Oh, no, sorry, no, that, Safiwe, did you want to say something?
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Louise. I would like to say thank you to you, Zongeza, for a brilliant book. I just managed to get a copy over the weekend, and I've started reading. Just a couple of comments. The first one for me is that it's very clear that I think as South Africans, we should, as we map up our way forward, we should not be bogged down by the internal fights within the African National Congress, which continue to fill, the news headlines. I'm personally tired of of having to be entertained by the various issues that are taking place there. So that's that. If we as South Africans can begin to shift away from that, let them fight. And I don't know if the word that's possible, to be apathetic to those fights, but I think it's both. It causes us to be bogged down by nonsense. That's number one. I think number two is that obviously, in reference to the ANC again, I think there are two ANCs. There is one that is involved in the liberation of South Africa. I mean, we have men and women that we can list, but I do not think that the ANC was actually prepared in 1994 to govern. So it's a failed project. I as much as I voted for the ANC in the past, but I think it feels like I contributed to that. I think the second thing is that as part of the middle class and someone who is in their 50s, I think it's just starting to read your book. I have always wanted to be away from the chattering classes, but actually become far more involved in a little suburb where I live. And again, when you begin to get involved, you come across political parties. I mean, there are two dominant ones in the suburb where I live. So how do we explore them, creative ways in which we could do that? Because I think one of the things that Thabo wanted to do was to say, once all these middle class people moved into these suburbs, let them form, if they lived in Sandton, let them form branches there. I'm not wanting to form a branch, but I'm wanting to galvanize a group of people who live in my own suburb to get involved, not in a party, but to get involved in something. Thoughts there?
Thank you. So I agree with your first point, by the way. So I'm not going to dwell on it. We need to move past the ANC. Frankly, I'm no longer angry at them. I'm now seized with the job of making South Africa better. We just need to focus on that work and not allow ourselves to be distracted at all. 100% with you. So what I'm going to ask that we explore, because we are in the phase now of the democracy builder, where we're training trainers, we're basically empowering other people to do these workshops where they live, in the circles in which they participate, and so on. So I'd like us to get together about democracy builder, because democracy builder is about local political participation or civic participation, as it were, but civic participation is political in a sense, and in a way that is not party political. And when we come in there, we don't ask which party you voted for, which party you belong to. We are South African citizens. We are going to base our conversation on what is good for this community and what is good for South Africa. And therefore, I'd like you to ask if we can explore that sort of thing. Because if you can have 15, 20 young and old people, we do a democracy builder, and we see how far we can take it and how far we can expand it. I think that would be great. It would be non-party political. It would involve action now and action for the long term.
And Zongeza, how will people, is it about registering on the website to say we want to do a democracy builder? Should they send their details to you? Should they speak directly to Londiwe? How does it physically, practically, how's that going to work?
So it's info@rivoniacircle.org, and that email comes to Olibogang, and people just say, please come. I mean, we get calls or emails, and also on the website where people say, we want to participate in Democracy Builder. We also identify them ourselves, because we have to work with local activists, because we want to avoid parachuting ourselves in, because when you leave, the people don't take ownership of the decision. They need to want you there. What we find is that when you do that, you don't have to be there. They keep working when you're gone.
Okay.
So it's info@rivoniacircle.org.
I've put that in the chat. We've got two people who's got their hands up. The first one is Callum Uberall, sir, and then we'll hear your response to him, and then we'll go to Wayne from Outer.
Hi, Songezo. Yeah, so I think my question, busy reading your book now, which was given to me by my friend and colleague, Jean-Luc. And I think what I wanted to ask you is, like, what do you think the role of technology is in democracy currently? You know, when we look at systems and we look at decentralized systems and the world moving into a very sort of complex state of institutions and the acceleration of tech, even, you know, from the perspective of the African continent and how a lot of our technology is adopted from the West, and which sits with its own philosophies. What do you think about how we as African people should be developing and designing our own tech? Specifically, I think notably that tech is not the solution, but just basically an extension of our intentions. Yes. And like, what sort of motivations do we need there? I think this is something that, you know, me and my colleagues are very passionate about understanding, and not like reinventing the wheel, but looking at, like, how do we do technology differently here in our context? So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Before Songezo answers, Callum, I think it's important for you to just give Songezo a little bit of background about Black Box and what you've been up to in KZN, just so that he has that background.
Awesome, I'd love to. Elevator pitch. So basically, we've been building tech here for like the last 4 years. I've got a team of 6 that are actually behind me. And during the floods, we kind of stopped all our paid work and we built together a crisis map, which allowed, our vision is to steward African resources for African people. And we believe that that's the role that technology should play in society, as a role of stewardship. And we built this map in 36 hours. We worked around the clock, and we basically allowed people in communities across KZN to log their needs, just very publicly. It was a little bit absurd. You could basically put your address, your name, your number, and what you need. And then we also allowed, on the inverse, on the other side of the fence, anyone who had resources to log their resource. So we had a whole bunch of red dots for needs and a whole bunch of green dots for resources. And then when somebody met their neighbor's need, that dot would turn blue. And so what it allowed is, it allowed the citizen to engage in the crisis response on an individual level. And so it applied agency to your citizens, and it helped us also see, like, who are our active citizens. And then it also allowed government and non-profits to retrieve generic data from us about which areas were hit with what type of issue, from water to electricity to whatever. So we started exporting the generic non-personal data to various agencies and parts of government. And then we have a bunch of other tools. We've got a project called Open Seat, which is about opening your home and making money off food experiences, allowing food entrepreneurs to basically enter the hospitality market straight out of their home. Something we're very excited about. We've just launched that. So that's pretty much our heart. And that's kind of the context of the Black Box company.
Okay, awesome. I'd actually love to reach out to you, Callum. And thank you for that elevator pitch. In fact, we will definitely reach out to you. So, you know, if there's one big thing I'd like us to use I think we can use technology for, is to break down this highly hierarchical model of democratic participation, which has got the effect of sifting out people's views. Basically, there's a series of gatekeeping mechanisms that by the time a decision is taken eventually, it still doesn't resemble anything like what people really wanted. And a lot of people can't get to the physical participation point in terms of consultation, even when parliament or legislatures are doing it. I remember when they killed the scorpions, there was public participation, which was doctored actually. And they passed people in order to participate. Now, if our intention is to democratize, we would be able to frame the questions and to provide the platforms for more people to have a voice directly into the National Assembly in a way that instantly shows the views. Because what also happens with this consultation process is that they still ignore the submissions anyway. They go on a token process of consultation and then they proceed to do whatever they wanted anyway. Now, when you have a platform where you are able to even generate the heat maps around the preferences, the policy preferences that people have, and it's live, it's not the impact of disciplining the politicians to not just say, well, we'll still do our own thing anyway, because that is what is possible now. I think we need to cultivate a culture of continuous democratic participation. And if people feel that I can spend 10 minutes on my cell phone and I've been heard, and by the time I get to the meeting, I am just adding to what I've already said, but I can see it counts because I've mobilized other people and the picture is changing. I know what the country wants. So I think that's the big opportunity we have. Break down the gatekeeping and the hierarchies and make sure that people's views are really heard.
So we are looking forward to see what this is going to come out of this conversation, Callum. There was an invitation there. I hope you're going to say yes to that, you and Jean-Luc. Delighted that we can make that connection. Definitely. Next up is Wayne Devanaho, who's also got his hand up. So Wayne, over to you.
Yeah, hi Songeza. I know you've been very busy. I'm not sure if you've seen our request to engage. I think there's a lot of synergy. I mean, aside from holding government to account with our limited resources, it is about building solutions to empower local communities, which is where we are working and have spent 18 months developing a platform that enables communities to become properly organized, to understand their rights, powers, and engage to hold local government accounts. So it focuses in the local government space. Sounds like there might be some work there. I'm not sure what your plans are and whether we should be engaging sooner rather than later.
We must. I've just realized selling books is very hard. I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to do it again for a while. So I'm kind of on my last bit of the book tour next week, and then I'm mostly available. I sought out and got your number, by the way, so I'm going to reach out to you. If you mailed it to me, it must have done this, but I've got it on my phone, so I will reach out.
Thank you. Thanks.
So both of you can see my smile is going from one ear to the other, because that was what we were hoping to do, is to get Wayne and Songeza in a conversation, and Songeza and Callum. And now you were going to have, so did you want to say anything else, Wayne, other than just, I mean, how can you be in conversation with Wayne and Songeza and not go, these guys need to work together?
Yeah, no, Songeza's been busy, and well done on your input at the Defend Our Democracy session on Friday. That was also great 2 days. There's so much happening. I think we just got to find time to get down to the nitty gritty. But looking forward to our engagement with Songeza.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next person is Ashraf Garda. If those of you who don't know, Ashraf has made it his mission to mobilize a community of champions, people who are willing to both put a spotlight on good things that are happening, but also willing to step up and lead. And he's one of the most generous people in South Africa, always willing to amplify other people's work and really committed to this idea of a community of champions creating a champion nation. So Ashraf, over to you.
Thanks for that, Louise. All right, so hopefully you can hear me clearly, and if you can't, then just blame it on whoever, okay? Because I'm moving in a different space here today. So Gezo, I've done a speed, soundbite analysis of the book, but I haven't read it properly. So let's not get into that, okay? Accepting, this is it. You made the point that let's not talk about the ANC. Okay, so let's not talk about the ANC. So therefore, let's talk about the other parties. In order, DA, EFF, IFP, and then the others, the Action Party and whoever else is there. If you can answer that, I'll also ask you another thing that you can answer in one go. So that's the one. Then what's likely to happen to South Africa after the next election? That's point 2. And point 3, to you specifically, what's being done with the Rivonia Circle, I think, is admirable. Of course, you and I have had many interactions before. But here's the blunt question. It may come up in the book, maybe not. I've missed it. Are you shaping up via Rivonia Circle to morph into a political party that will contest an election, if not now, then pretty soon? That's it. Thank you.
All right. I might have to ask you to remind me of one, but on the opposition political parties. So in the book, I actually dismissed the top 3 without spending too much time on them. The reason is that they are not premised on deepening democratic participation. None of them do. And what South Africa needs is deeper and better democratic participation by as many South Africans as possible on a continuous basis. Because the narrow party political structures have an exclusionary impact on most South Africans who actually don't want to belong to a political party because of what happens in political parties. And South Africans don't have to belong to a political party in order to be heard. These parties also are not agitating for changes to our system of representation in such a way that when somebody gets elected in a constituency, they represent all of that constituency, not just members of their political party, but they've got into this thing of looking after their members. Their accountability is to the party and so on. And the shenanigans are what is turning people off. And what you saw in 2021 local government elections is that people just switched off. And we've been doing surveys and focus groups, and people say, no, I was not busy. I did not vote. I did not want to vote because I don't want to vote for any of these guys. Now, that's a very dangerous thing in a democracy, because you want your government and your representative structures to be legitimate. Now, do they say this? They don't. The last point, and there are many, is that they have become divisive too. South Africans need to be united in order to tackle our problems. We need to unite around the same values and so on. And you've got others are taking the constitution on the one hand or praising colonialism on the other. Why? Why would you do that? What purpose does it serve? Why would you do that? You know what I mean? So you've got these politics of spectacle and gimmickry that are divisive. And I think South African people deserve better. And so that is why I'm saying, let's not spend a lot of time trying to make them better, because they are not interested. If they were, they would make themselves better, but they either can't or they don't want to. And then there is a question, and I know you asked me 3 things, but there is a question of the Rivonia Circle vis-a-vis the politics. So here's the thing, and I get excited about this, Ashraf, because we have left the production of ideas to political parties in the sense of manifestos, which are there specifically to win votes. It's an ad. It's not taking a 5, 10, 25, 40-year view of where we need to be. The reason Rivonia Circle is a think tank is that you need to understand the past, you need to understand the present, and you need to develop insights about the future and say, in the next 40 years, this is what South Africa can be if we place the following in place. You need to professionalize that work. And therefore, Rivonia Circle will remain this think tank, I am hoping, for 100 years as a think tank, because you must have this space where people feel that I don't need to belong to a political party to contribute to the future of my country. I can contribute my ideas there. They don't have to be in a manifesto. I don't have to be a branch member. I can be anybody. And they will welcome me and make me part of developing the ideas. And later on, I can say I was part of it. So that's the purpose of Rivonia Circle. If any of us want to get into politics, we will then have to leave the Rivonia circle to stay as an institution that is a non-profit company. In fact, we're going to apply for a public benefit organization certificate soon, because we must institutionalize the production of the long-term thinking and galvanizing society to produce ideas. So that's what a Rivonia Circle is about. The democratization, if we're doing it on a party political platform, again, people are going to say, yeah, you want our votes, Nina. So, you must do it in a thing that is neutral, so people can feel that they are welcome. I can belong to the IFP and sit next to an ANC person, and it's okay. Because nobody cares what party I belong to. In that, Ashraf, you asked me 3 things. Now, what was the third one?
So the third one, and maybe I'll add the 4th one because it's linked, right? So you made the point about the voting circle. I've got that, right? So the second question I asked, if not the ANC, and you quite rightly have written off the top 3, because I write off the top 3 myself, just so that you know that, right? So in the absence of the top 3, what then would happen to South Africa after that next election beyond that? And this is the next part that you can just answer in one go. So in the absence of the political parties setting the democratic agenda, how then do you see all of us who care deeply about our country, who are committed to our own organizations, our own lives, our own families, but absolutely on side when it comes to South Africa, how then are we able to influence the type of, well, what I call a champion nation outside of the political spaces?
Ashraf, I want to add to that question. And who do I vote for in 2024? Because
okay, guys. So in fact, I know Wayne he's just said that he was a defender of democracy, right? This past weekend, Reverend Frank Chikane floated the idea of a people's manifesto. The people's manifesto. Let me tell you what one of our objectives is with this South Africa 2.0 idea, is that the people must have their own manifesto before an election, so that people are able to say, listen, if you're not going to do these 5 things in this way, I'm not talking to you, leave my house, right? Because you need that level of clarity and political engagement first. My wish, and it's a wish, is that people like us would get together and just say, you know what, we're going to form our own movement. How it works exactly, Ashraf, I don't know. But we've got so many people who are not voting, who've already decided to switch off, right? And yet the depth of talent and patriotism that you have everywhere is enormous. It's a tragedy that we are not able to come together and say, as Richard Branson says, screw that, let's do it, right? How that would work, honestly, I don't know. And when I looked at the declaration from Defender Democracy, a part of me wished that they would say, we're tired of all of you. We're going to do our own thing as civil society. We're going to change this country. We'll mobilize the best and we'll find a way. So I'm sorry, I don't have a specific answer. I've given you what my wish is. But the People's Manifesto for me is an idea, because the performance contract is not between the president and ministers. It's between us and our public representatives. And we can start agitating now to say, in 2024, we will elect only people who are going to change this electoral system, so that in 2029, we elect the best directly to represent us in parliament. If you don't support electoral reform in 2024, don't come into my house, and I'm not coming to your rally either.
Okay, so got that in terms of maybe the lack of clarity in terms of what happens, but what's interesting is there are definitely formations taking place, whether they firm alliances or loose alliances. There's a commitment amongst many people outside of the political space to say, who said I can't contribute to my country? Okay, I get that. But the last thing that you didn't answer, and it's more urgent, so what's going to happen in a couple of years' time with that general election and the period immediately thereafter?
Ashraf, if we don't start doing this work of organizing increasingly in the way that we did this past weekend, firstly, And secondly, working towards the People's Manifesto, we are going to have a disaster after 2024. Because, Ashraf, when these people negotiate their coalitions in 2024, our pound of flesh as the people needs to be very clear. The condition upon which we will legitimize any coalition government. Because that contest will be about raw power, Ashraf, nothing else. And the disaster we see in the councils is going to happen in the union buildings and cabinet. And we will not have a country anymore. That's why I'm saying I'm quite happy for this conversation to evolve. And I'm hoping that out of our People's Manifesto, we start seeing the emergence of many great South Africans who've said, we resolve a year from yesterday or last Saturday that actually we'll contest all of you together. And I don't know how that works, Ashraf, but that's my wish. But I think we'll have a disaster 2024.
Okay, got that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashraf. So Londiwe had her hand up before.
I hope she's going to help answer some of my questions.
Londiwe, we need some solutions here, and we need it from young people because the old people are running out of ideas here. And then after Londiwe, we'll hear from John Luke. But Londiwe, you first.
Sure. I think, one of the most interesting things about engaging, particularly with young people, is realizing that they have the solutions. And I think there's a crisis of not taking those solutions seriously, particularly when they come from young people. And I think one of the things that must shift in the way that we think about solutions, that we think about democratization, that we think about governance, is who is the expert in the room. And if the expert in the room is going to be Ubabu Kwete Mantashe, then we are in trouble, right? The expert in the room on youth issues is the young person. And that's just true. And I think that we must take that seriously. So there's a young activist, her name is Shelley. She's from the Northwest. And I'm going to tell her story just in response to one of the questions in the chats around South Africans being really good at creating sort of alternative solutions or parallel solutions. So she was, we're doing this democracy builder, we're talking about this democracy governance, yada, yada, yada. And then she says, well, why should I be engaging the government? Why should I be engaging this democracy? Because what we don't have, or what we didn't have in my community, was a school. And so we built one. We got together as the community, we built the school, we called the government to say, please hire teachers. That's all we needed them to do. We built the toilets in the school, we made sure that the school hit all the standards for safety and all of that, right? So so that story tells us two things. One, that there's a clear action from people and their communities, from young people and their communities, right? But two, that people are able to directly solve their problems. But I think it's incredibly important for us to not shift the burden from government. The burdens that government has are burdens that exist and that must be there, right? Because we are tax-paying citizens, because we really hire them. When we vote for people, we hire them to come up with solutions and to create the kind of thing that we want to create. And so I think, this idea of civil society or the private sector must do it, or civil society must do it, or the people must just do it for themselves. I think, of course, we must engage and we must work in our communities, but we must not let government skate through just living their lives, stealing money. It can't be. They have to take responsibility and be held accountable for the things that they are actually supposed to do. It is their job to provide services, right? And so my question then becomes, how do we then bring these two things together? How do we create a space for people and government to do governance together? because we don't have to do it by ourselves. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to think about something completely new and so innovative and so out the box. How do we create that platform that brings those two things together? And I think part of the thing that we're trying to do at Rivonia Circle is to create that platform of bringing government and bringing people, civil society, the private sector, everybody, all this, the sectors that are involved, to a platform for governance, and just creating a better governance. So I don't have an answer to the question around how do we sort of take back our taxes and, you know, ensure that they're working for us. And maybe then we need to have a conversation about using the accountability measures that already exist. Do they work? Do they not work? How do we create better accountability measures? And just don't vote for these people that we've voted for before.
Thank you, Lindiwe. We need you. We need you to kind of just be that voice of reason. And we love your energy and your... Zongeza, I'm with you. Let's let these 50 plus years people just be in service of Lindiwe. That would be a better world. I want to be part of that world.
The thing about being young is that you can't, and I'm not young, I'm 46, right? So I will soon be on the other side of yeah. So the thing about being young, though, is that you're not afraid of failing. You're not. You just want to do it. You want to get on with it, right? And failing is okay, actually. What really matters is that you do it with a good heart, with good intention. You work hard, you apply yourself. If it doesn't work, it's fine. You wake up and you try again. And that's what we must not be afraid of with regards to letting young people lead.
So I want to give Londiwe, one of the things that's been very helpful for me on my social entrepreneurship journey is a message from Peter Block, who wrote a book. The book is called The Answer to How is Yes. So I'm hearing you just saying a whole bunch of people just need to say yes. We'll figure it out. We just need to say we're in. And so today I'm hearing many people are saying we're in. Thank you, Lindiwe. Let's hear from John Luke, who is one of the people who's in wholeheartedly, has been reading your book, has been sharing the book, has been telling other people about the book. John Luke, over to you.
Thanks so much, Louise. And Zongeza, this is an incredible privilege. In reading your book in the time that I did, I must admit, the first half of the book, I almost bought a ticket somewhere else, and the second half of the book inspired me to stay. I think the biggest thing, and I left this message in the comment section, Louise has raised it, is finding the metrics for the meters we make in terms of the progress. Having a compass that gives us a dashboard of, are we making progress towards our goals or not? And they can be quantitative or qualitative metrics, but having those metrics on a dashboard where we can measure if we are heading in the right direction. And also just wanted to, on the point of Rivonia Circle and what it's trying to achieve, a big part of my inspiration for getting involved in civic action and was teaching a module on Steve Biko's Black consciousness movements during my tertiary education. And then having this opportunity to learn about consciousness as this mode of being in the world. And that's what resonated with me with Rivonia Circle. It's not so much a political, it has political implications, but is more a movement. It's something that's trying to grapple with deepening democracy and decentralizing that conversation and democratizing it, as you've said. And so I just want to say incredible thanks. You've got my vote, and I think the people that I've invited to be at this talk have been incredibly inspired by your words and in the book and in what you've said. And so just wanted to encourage to say that we are putting up our hand, and we just want to work towards metrics for our progress.
Okay, so Louise,
she's got all the answers.
Yes, and you've got my number, so please just pick it off the group, and let's get in touch and start working.
So we're coming to the end, Zongeza, and we want to do it in a particular way. One is I want to create an opportunity for the people on the call who want to express appreciation to you and Londiwe. Lukona was on the call, but I think he might have some challenges with being connected. But Lamkona and Tessa and everybody working behind the scenes. So we are in the business. We know that human beings need to hear 5-to-1 appreciation to criticism. We've seen some of the criticisms. I want to create a space for appreciation to be expressed. I'm looking at all of my colleagues. Please, could you just open your mic? We want to make sure that these people who have put their, who are in the arena are supported by our words of support and appreciation. So that's the one thing. And then Zongezo, the last time when I did a session with Tuli, she ended the session. She said, Louise, what is the patkos you want to give us? So let's get some patkos from Zongezo. But then I really do want to invite people who want to just say with their mouth what they've appreciated about being here to just open their mic while Zongezo is giving us a few thoughts for patkos. Zongezo, so let's start with you. You give us some patkos, and then people are just going to get themselves organized to say something. Lesego is going to say something, but we'll hear some patkos from you first.
So thanks very much, Louise. So you know what, I mean, I will say two things only. The first is that South Africa is our country. It's our land. It belongs to us. And we must not hand it over to just a few people at any point. We must take ownership of every aspect of South African life. That's important as an attitude to say this country belongs to us. It's a democracy. That means we govern ourselves, and we will create or change institutions in order to make sure that more, not less, South Africans are able to participate in shaping our country's destiny. I think that's really, really important. The second thing is that I want us to not be afraid. The things we see, the load shedding and the water problems and so on, I believe that it's necessary. It has become necessary for us to go through them at this stage so that we can appreciate what we have and what we potentially may lose, but to also appreciate that there is enough of us in the country. There is enough talent, there is enough goodwill, there is enough people to change this country for the better. Our only problem is working in an organized fashion. That's all. It's working in an organized fashion. And therefore, we need to remind every South African in South Africa and abroad that, hey, we have a country to turn around and make the best country in the whole world. I am incredibly optimistic. I go to bed less angry because I actually just don't concern myself with the Guatemalans. And honestly, I don't. I am seized every day with what can we do tomorrow? What can we do tomorrow? It's small steps, but as long as we move forward, it's going to be fine. As long as more people come into these kind of conversations and we find more people and we find more people, there are more of us. There are more of us than them, those who want to destroy the country. Honestly, there are more of us. We just need to get together and just decide this far and no further. This is our country, we're taking it back, and we're going to make it the best country in the whole world. You can either get on the bus or stay behind, but it's moving. It's a joyful attitude, and I think we must adopt it and just go for it.
Zongezo, you remind me every day of the last 12 years of being involved in Partners for Possibility. I have felt that if get out, do stuff. Don't wait to be for someone else. Take the future in our own hands. And know that we are being called, each and every one of us. We are the leaders we've been waiting for. So let's hear from Lesego and Steve and anybody else who want to say just final words in appreciation for the session. But Lesego first.
Yes. Hi, Lewis. Thanks very much for organizing this forum. I just wanted to make a comment that myself working with the community, I just find a lot of young people don't get to get this information about what we're talking about, this debate. So what I'm doing in my community, I come up with debate competitions and public speaking, and I bring up these type of topics. And so that helps a lot. But another thing that you should watch, I think, is a lot of people have not registered as voters. And I think we need to start working on that before 2024, so that when they are ready to vote, then they, because they think they can go a day before and go and vote, but we need to start conscientizing people now to start registering. That is not existing on the ground at all. So I don't know whether somebody has an idea on how to do this, but yeah, that's what I'm doing in my community anyway.
Lesecha, we'll just get you and Londiwe connected, and then you'll get a whole community of young people who are doing citizen education around the country, and we're going to cheer you on every step of the way, and we'll be there next to you if you need us. So thank you, Lesecha. Let's hear from Moira. So let me tell you about Moira. Moira is a South African who is currently living in France, and her heart is pumping jelly tots when she hears all of this. Moira.
That's couldn't have said it better myself, Louise. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you from France. I feel very privileged to have this inside view of the start of this wonderful wave of optimism. Thank you so much. And Songiza, go for it.
Thank you. And now the next person who's got himself unmuted, Songezo, is an amazing guy called Steve Hall, who has written a book that if you've not read it, you should read. It's called, Steve, you have to tell us, Different Lenses, but it's a wonderful book to help us realize how everything we do is influenced by the stories we have about the world we live in. So that's Steve, and Steve wanted to say something.
Songezo, thank you, and Louise, thank you for the opportunity. What a wonderful few hours that have just disappeared so quickly. You reminded me, Songezo, of a story, and it was a story my father told me when he used to work for South African breweries all those years ago. The story related to the structures of the townships of the time. And to some extent, they're still alive today. He said that between every small holding, every mkuku, every small place, there was a fence called a stop nonsense. And it wasn't designed to keep you in or out. There were holes in the fence. There were holes in the prefab walls, which were the next generation of the fences. But it was a reminder that when you come to my house, just don't stop. Just don't bring your nonsense. Stop nonsense. And to some degree, you've reminded me that there's a role for us all to play in the stop nonsense. Who we vote for, who we listen to, who we pay attention to. That we bring a lot of nonsense into our own lives, into our own community, which may not necessarily be true or helpful. But what's fascinating is that every fence also had a gate, and the gate was called a double up. And it's not a double up in English, it's one word, double up. And I think what you provide for me is this opportunity to double up. And to double up means come through the gate. Let's create connection. Let's create platforms. Let's create networks. And the double up was the community response to the hierarchical system of the then police. That they could move stuff through the double up system. They could connect, they could relate, they could form amazing networks. And a network will always beat a hierarchy over time. And so you remind me of the possibility of these things, Songezo, and thank you very, very much for your time, but spectacularly so for your energy. I'm looking forward to reading your book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve has just reminded us of our theory of change that says that if we want to do big things together, we first have to become enchanted with each other. And so a lot of enchantment happening this afternoon, Zongezo. We are thoroughly enchanted with you and with each other, and ready to do big things together. So with that, I want to bid you a good afternoon and look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks very much, Louise, and everyone.